This is the behind-the-scenes video for Two Lights Beckon from the debut album UTOPIA by my band Black Halo. This song was not originally supposed to be on the album, and it is replacing what used to be the final song. That was called Farewell. And the issue with that song, aside from me realizing eventually that I just didn't like it, even though I was the sole songwriter, is that it reminded people of a popular song. I'm not going to name it, but it's a well-known song, and every time someone heard the opening guitar riff, which had this melody in it, people would realize, that sounds like that song. Now, I didn't know that when I first wrote it. I won't go into this too much detail, but basically when I played that riff, I thought, yeah, that sounds familiar, but I couldn't place it. And then sometime later, I realized it. But mine was a little bit different, but it wasn't so different that it sounded like something else completely. People still recognized, yeah, that reminds me of this. So I eventually got rid of it because of this. Now, I'm always writing songs, and as it turns out, this album was held up for a very long time. So when I was looking at the other songs lying around, I chose this one because it has a lot of energy to it, and the opening song on the album, the title track, also has that, and I kind of liked doing that as kind of bookends. It reminded me of the Master of Puppets album by Metallica, and you can't go wrong there. Now, at the time that I chose this song, I had written all the riffs, but I had not written any lyrics or vocal melodies for it, and those were written to replace the song that was removed. So this, subject-wise, was written to go with the concept album, and with this being the last song on it. As it turns out, the song that was removed was one of the only ones that the original singer for this band actually sang in the studio. So technically I do have that. Now, as it turns out, Chase Breedlove, who did the vocals on the final album, he likes that song and wants me to do it, but as the guy behind Black Halo, I get to override him. So I don't think that's ever going to see the light of day, but he has suggested that maybe I tweak the parts of it that sounded like some other song, and maybe I'll do that at some point, but I don't think so right now. This is the last song that was written and recorded for the UTOPIA album, and it wasn't written to be on it. What was happening is that my son was about 10 years old at the time, and he was a budding drummer, so I have the electronic drum kit sitting here on my side, and so I would sit here and jam on guitar while he was playing drums, and sometimes he couldn't think of a drum beat to start, so I would just start playing a rhythm, and I just improvised the opening rhythm that you hear at the beginning of the song, and then we started playing along. Now, he wasn't as good a drummer then as, say, Dirk Verbeuren, who did the final drums, or even me, although in the 3 years since then, he's gotten pretty good, and I think he might actually be able to play the drum parts on this, but he was doing something relatively simple at the time compared to what's there now. Now, I tend to write pretty quickly, partly because I've been playing guitar a very long time, and I have my own ways of doing things. So in about 10 minutes as we were jamming, I wrote the entire song except for the riffs under the guitar solo and the verse. So this came together really quickly. This was by no means the first song I had written by accident while jamming with my son. And every time this would happen, at some point he would leave and go do whatever, play video games. And I would say, okay, I need to record this really quick in my studio here so I don't forget it, even though I don't usually forget it, but I figured why not just record a scratch track while it's fresh, since I already had the studio up. So as I was doing that, I realized I was missing the verse. The structure of the riffs that I had was mostly complete, but I wanted to add something in between. And as I was sitting there trying to think, what should I do for a verse? My hands were doing their own thing, improvising what turned out to be the verse. So it's kind of funny, I'm sitting there playing a riff that is going to be the verse while I'm sitting there also thinking, gee, what should I do for a riff? And then as I was thinking about that, I started to notice what my hand was doing, and I thought, that actually works. So that was how that was added. Except for the verse, all of the music is basically a variation on that opening rhythm. And this is something I could demonstrate for you. If you watch the guitar playthrough video, you may be able to see it. You might also be able to hear it when you listen to the song. Everything comes from just that single note in that rhythm at the beginning of the song, except for the verse. All of the vocal melodies for the verses and the chorus were written in my head and then worked out on my guitar. This tends to be the case with vocal melodies more than, say, guitar solos, where that I tend to do on the actual guitar. I don't necessarily hear it in my head ahead of time, although sometimes with guitar solos, I will have a basic feel in my head for what I want to do. But these vocal melodies were all done in my head. The vocal melody for the chorus, if you listen carefully, it's following the rhythm guitar in the background to some extent. But if it followed the exact same rhythm, it sounded almost a little too sing-songy, and initially it was a little too obvious to me, and I didn't want to do it. So the trick there was to really slightly alter the rhythm of the vocal melody so it's not exactly matching parts of the rhythm guitar. It's a little hard to explain that, but if you listen closely, you'll hear the guitars going dun dun and dun dun dun. That second time, the rhythm is slightly different between the vocal melody and the guitar, and that was what made it work. Lyrically, I knew this was replacing the last song on the album, and that one had lyrics that were ambiguous about the fate of the character. If you followed the concept album, you know that this is about someone who's troubled, and he ultimately attempts to take his life in the previous song. And in this song, I wanted him to be having an out-of-body experience. And I also wanted it to be vague as to whether he decides to come back to life or he goes to the afterlife. That's what the two lights beckoning are. One leads back to life, one is to the afterlife. This was purposely written to be vague so that you could decide for yourself what he does. When it comes to the performances, I think this is some of the best vocals that Chase has done on the album. He sounds appropriately unhinged at times, and I love it when he does that. It's always kind of nice to hear a character seem like they're losing it. The guitar solo on this is one of the fastest on the album, and it was done a full decade after every other lead guitar part on this album. And it was the first time I'd done a solo in that long. So to some extent, was I thinking, do I still have what it takes? Can I still do this? Yeah, a little bit. I don't really question that just because I've been playing so long. But yeah, I was pretty pleased with the way this turned out given the lack of lead guitar over the previous decade. Now, despite my son having played drums when I wrote this, when I actually recorded it, I did the drums on this. And if you want to hear what that sounds like, you can actually download the MP3 or listen to it anyway, streaming it by joining the newsletter, and I'll send you a link to this. I did the drums and a full workup on this, even though I knew I'd be hiring someone else to redo them. And the reason for that is primarily that I think it sounds a little too tight and rigid if the same person's feel is on the guitars, the bass, and the drums. I ended up doing the bass guitar on this because I hired Dirk Verbeuren, Megadeth's drummer, to do the drums, and he's a premium player. He comes at a premium cost, and unfortunately that meant using up the budget to hire someone else to do the bass. But at the same time, I didn't feel like the bass guitar in this was the kind of thing where I really needed someone who's a pro-level bassist to do this, because the rhythm guitar is so aggressive that the bass has to follow that. I could explain what I mean, but if you listen to a lighter song like Darkness Falls, there's a lot more open space in that, where having a bassist's feel be in there and be different, and they think of things differently than I do as a guitarist, that can really add to the depth of the song. But in this case, it's also tight that to me it was like, okay, rhythm guitars, bass, and drums, they're all at times, like right in the beginning, they're all doing exactly the same thing. And to some extent, that was true everywhere. I have a whole other video about what it was like to work with Dirk Verbeuren of Megadeth when he did the drums on this, but it was all done very quickly. I sent him stuff, and when I reached out to him, 2 weeks later, he had already done the drums on this and on In Death I Linger On. So he's very much a pro, and I really enjoyed working with him. As it turns out, a lot of the drums he did on this song were pretty similar to what I had done, including the basic drum beats. I thought he would change that more than what I did. He even did my drum fills that are right before each verse, when I thought maybe that's not as good as a drum fill as someone else would do, but he repeated them, so I've always decided to take this as a compliment that he actually repeated drum fills of mine. This song was also reamped a full 15 years after the rest of the album was. Now, if you're not sure what reamping means, basically you plug the guitar directly into the recording studio software. In fact, this over my shoulder, that's what I'm plugging my guitar into. The plugs are on the back, so that's why you don't see something sticking out the front. But I record the raw signal of the guitar, and then it comes through an amp simulator. Well, the good part about doing this is that if you want to change the sound of the guitar amp after you did the performance, you can without having to re-perform it. So when an album is completely done, I take it to my recording engineer's or my mixing engineer's studio, and with my amp, and we set it all up, and we re-amp the guitar tone there. Now, I figured with so much time having passed, even though I was using the same amp, I figured the tone's probably going to sound different. And it actually doesn't. This came as a surprise to me. And I remember standing there in the studio with Drew, and he's got everything coming out, and I said, I can't believe how much this sounds like the rest of the songs. And he said, well, it is your guitar tone. And I thought, okay, well, that does make sense. A lot of people think guitar tone is your amp or your guitar. It's really the player. This is why no one sounds like Eddie Van Halen. Even so many people have met Eddie Van Halen, big name guitar players, and they've said, oh, can I play through your Frankenstrat and your infamous amp? And he goes, yeah, sure. And they play through it, and they don't sound like him, and they're always surprised because the tone is actually coming from the player. Now, that said, this is also the only song on the album that was not recorded on one of my 6-string guitars that I had made. It's actually on an Ibanez. I think it's called an Ibanez Demon. It's a 7-string guitar, which was actually my son's at the time. Since then, I have bought that guitar from him because he didn't want the 7-string anymore, so now I have a 7-string. But this is also the guitar you see in some of the promo shots of me. It's the white one. There are several things about the song that are different from the rest of the album, and this is another one. So those are all the stories I have about Two Lights Beckon. Please remember to like and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you at the next one.